The question is that the address be agreed to. Before I call the member for Moreton, I remind the House that this is the honourable member's first speech, and I ask the House to extend to him the usual courtesies. The member for Moreton.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. And firstly, may I congratulate you on your new position. You showed kindness to me on the first occasion that we met, and I'm hopeful that this kindness will continue should the need arise, although that's very unlikely. I stand here beneath our radiant Southern Cross in this magnificent People's Building, below our coat of arms, very aware that I'm a long, long way from the banks of the beautiful Balonne River. Nevertheless, I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I was born and the traditional owners of the Moreton electorate where I live and the land here on which I stand. I thank them all for their continuing stewardship and was heartened last week to be welcomed here by Matilda House and her people. Mr Speaker, I also acknowledge the 8 previous members who have represented the Federation seat of Moreton: James Wilkinson, Hugh Sinclair, Arnold Weinholt, Joss Francis, Jim Killen, Don Cameron and Gary Gibson, who's up there in the chamber, and Gary Hargrave. I especially appreciated the phone calls and good wishes from Don Cameron and Gary Gibson. Unfortunately, Mr Speaker, one of Moreton's most magnificent former members died last year, leaving giant shoes. Sir James Killen once declared in an exchange with Gough Whitlam, and with your indulgence I will quote, Mr Speaker, that he swam bare-assed in the Condamine with Aboriginals. So I thought I should inform the House that I too have completed this feat. But out of respect for my Murray friends from St George, I won't name anyone. When I grew up out west, it was not alongside members of the stolen generation. However, way too many of my Indigenous friends belong to a lost generation. It is very sad that not all of my Murray mates are around today to see where I have ended up. Brian, Greg, Frank, David, too many names, too many young lives lost, too many tears, way too many. I still see your faces and hear your songs. However, today is not about sad words. Too many sad words make a sad, sad song. Instead, I'm cheered by the commitment made by Kevin Rudd and Jenny Macklin here last week after the Sorry to the Stolen Generations. Surely that was one of the greatest days in this Parliament. I thank them both for the commitment to providing hope with dignity for so many Indigenous people. For way too long, I personally felt there was a void at the heart of Australia. Maybe a spiritual void or a moral void, I'm not sure. But the 67 referendum and the Mabo decision both went some way to erasing the horrible fabrication that was terra nullius. Then Paul Keating's Native Title Act was a further lurch towards making wrongs right. Let us hope that the legacy of this 42nd Parliament will be the recommencement of the journey towards healing and changing Indigenous lives and erasing that void. When I grew up in St George, politicians were blokes in tweed jackets who sporadically flitted into town and unveiled plaques and made long speeches at school assemblies. I'm looking to that side of the House, but today I see politicians from a different side. Now my Premier is a progressive woman called Anna, who has probably never owned a tweed jacket, and my Prime Minister is a nice bright bloke called Kevin. His Queenslander is just down the road from me, but I hear he now has a nice house here in Canberra. Mr Speaker, I got into politics originally because that great visionary, Paul Keating, left this chamber. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I thought there wasn't room for the two of us. It's just that I was pretty happy with the world in the 90s while Mr Keating was my Prime Minister and Wayne Goss was my Premier. But once these two noble gentlemen were gone, I decided it was time to be more fair dinkum. Actions speak louder than whinging. So I joined one of Australia's greatest and proudest community organisations, the Australian Labor Party. Once I joined Labor, I was delighted to meet a few politicians, such as the current member for Brisbane, and quickly realised they were a lot like me. In fact, when I look at the earlier careers of most members in this chamber, they are usually former teachers or solicitors or union officials, or farmers, or policy advisors, or from the private sector. And because I've done every single one of those jobs, I'm optimistic about my skills, which will help the good people of Moreton. Mr Speaker, as you might recall from your visit in 2004, my electorate is a majestic place. But for the benefit of the chamber, I will detail some of its features. Moreton is close to the thriving heart of Brisbane, but not too close. We are blessed with the peaceful Brisbane River to the north, the rugged beauty of Karawatha Forest to the south, the lungs of Oxley Creek to the west, and in the middle there is Toohey Forest and Griffith University. In addition to this seat of progressive learning, Moreton is also blessed with 3 other state-of-the-art training facilities, fantastic schools and great hospitals. Moreton has some of Australia's major roads and train lines and is the engine room of manufacturing in Queensland. Unfortunately, this creates some local issues, but I am committed to easing the congestion squeeze. I will not be passing the buck, unless it is only briefly back to the Leader of the House for discussions. I want to sort out the sound barriers on Ryena Road and the Acacia Ridge Elizabeth Street overpass and the Kessels and Mains Road intersection and the Toohey Road bike path. These are my first traffic priorities, and I will work with the local and state governments to achieve real results, irrespective of their political flavour. But, Mr Speaker, Moreton is not all about business. It also has the best multicultural food in Australia. We have something to tickle your taste buds, whether it be the African restaurants of Maruka, or the Asian cuisine of Sunnybank, or the halal food of, well, just about anywhere in Moreton. Mr Speaker, I especially acknowledge the representatives from the Chinese community who have flown down here to see me today. Ni hao, Lewis, Kenny and Jack, she ni. The Chinese diaspora is committed, like so many other groups in Moreton, to a harmonious, multicultural Australian society. Just like the wonderfully warm Islamic people, like Moreton's varied churches and our community and environmental groups, they too are dedicated to understanding and tolerance. Mr Speaker, this is what makes Moreton the best place in the world to live or to visit. Contrary to earlier misguided statements, I don't see an exhausted community. Instead, I see suburbs full of people who are committed to getting on with and helping their neighbours. I don't believe in any form of racism. I don't believe in any form of discrimination or segregation. The Australian sense of the fair go is alive and well and living on the south side of Brisbane, and I will work hard to ensure that unfair racist accusations are never ever again given oxygen in my neighbourhood. Mr Speaker, I stand here as somebody of Irish, French and Italian heritage, representing an electorate where 1 in 3 voters was born overseas. I wish to remind all Australians that the price of harmony is hard work. Each and every one of us must be eternally vigilant when it comes to community relations. We must knock on all our neighbours' doors and offer a helping hand. We must build understanding, trust and friendship, irrespective of race, religion, age or political beliefs. Mr Speaker, I now wish to thank some of the people who helped get me here. Firstly, to my mother, the indomitable Peggy Perrott. Your courage, stoicism, love of literature, telling yarns, travel and having good times with your friends inspired me as a child and guides me still as an adult. Thank you, Mum. I'm proud to stand here as your son. I also acknowledge my indefatigable father, Brian Perrott, and each and every one of my siblings. Now, Mr Speaker, because my mum was a good Catholic girl, this will take a bit of time. Firstly, to David and Claire Perrott. David surely never thought 20 years ago when he helped erect this house of the people that his little brother would get to stand here in awe of the exquisite skill and craftsmanship. Next, to Debbie and Philip Boland. Thanks for all those years of babysitting and support and employment. My many years of labouring on your farm certainly made me study hard at university. To Malcolm Perrott, who's deceased, who's watching down from way up above the flagpole with my uncle Straw Morrissey, my partner's father Stanley Scoynes and my grandfather TJ Morrissey. Coincidentally, for the information of the members for Robertson and Hale, My grandfather comes from Duca, which is actually an outer suburb of Allora. My great-uncle's name, James Alphonsus Morrissey, is on the Allora War Memorial because he lost his life at Ypres. And surely there is nothing more moving than standing at the Menin Gate and seeing all those young names. To my brother Mark and Karen Perrott for teaching me to appreciate nature, and especially to Mark for his laughter and strength. To my brother Simon Perrott, who's in the gallery, and Michael Trelfo for their sterling work on my election campaigns and godfather duties. To Kerry and Peter Shearer for their friendship, love, and most importantly, babysitting. To Timothy Perrott, my younger brother Timothy, for showing me horribly through his tragic workplace accident and the deaths of his two fellow workers, the importance of health and safety on work sites. Mr. Speaker, everybody in this chamber must recognise the important role our unions play in saving lives every single day, all around Australia. To Nick Perrott and Tony for making me laugh and never for 1 minute thinking that I'm the best. And last, to Megan Perrott, the last Perrott in the Perrott family, but definitely not the least, one of the most generous people I've ever met and the best electrician in Queensland, without offending the member for Deakin. No, I did say Queensland, and a godmother par excellence. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to go on the record and thank some very good friends. Peter Brown, Michael Watson, my teachers in St George, Linda Walsh and Anne Riley, Aaron Brady, John Carrozza and all the Gophers, Judy Locke, David O'Sullivan, Roy Knott, David Dell'Antonio, Karen Campbell, Dean Sullivan, Annie Ballard, Chris Holt, Thomas Pedersen, Noel Nidgery, who's here in the gallery, to Dean Crocker, also in the gallery, Peter Shaw, up in the gallery, and Greg Rudd. I also acknowledge my mentors in education, Gary McLennan, Graham Bruce, Debbie Calhoun, Joe Ryan, Del Jones, and brother Terence Heinrich, and in law, Michael Quinn, and in mining, Stephen Robinson, Jeff Wilson, and Michael Roach. Thank you all for your guidance. I also proudly acknowledge my godchildren, Tricia Boland, August Sullivan, Alexander Crocker, who's also up in the gallery, Charlotte Knott and Erin Shearer, and hope that my spiritual guidance will always pass muster, especially on the floor of the chamber. I willingly thank all my friends and comrades in the union movement and the ALP. As a so-called union thug, I gladly acknowledge the crucial role the Labor movement played in my election night success. So many decent, talented, hard-working, honourable people worked incredible hours. To quote from that great Western philosopher from the 1980s, I love yous all. That's Western Sydney, of course. I'm especially thankful to Russell Carr and the AMIEU for their support and advice, and the LHMU, the ETU, the RTBU, the AMWU, and my old union, QIEU. To Andrew and Trish Ramsey, Ken and Robin Boyne, and all of the Your Rights at Work team, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you again. I acknowledge my previous campaign managers, Joe Justo and Karen Struthers, and my 2007 campaign director, Rosalind McLennan, aka Wonder Woman. Ros, you are an absolute legend. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, my campaign directors seem to keep having babies. This has got nothing to do with me, but it might make it hard for me to recruit somebody for the Kevin 11 campaign, but I'll worry about that later. One thing is for certain, the future of Labor is in safe hands whenever women of this calibre take leadership roles. And to the rest of the Moreton team, David Ford, who is the most passionate Irishman in Australia, which is saying something, to Terry Wood from the ALP and the rest of the ALP team, to Dallas Alvery, Brad Hayes, the irrepressible Kate Perry, Braden Hogan, and all of the Union and Labor Party members and family and friends and community leaders like Faisal Hatia, Father John Scariot and Mustafa Ali, and the elected representatives at the state level, Karen Struthers, Stephen Robinson, Anna Bligh, Phil Reeves, Simon Finn, Ronan Lee, Judy Spence and Gary Fenlon. Steve Griffiths, Helen Abrahams, Gail McPherson and Kevin Bianchi from the Brisbane City Council, and also to Craig Emerson, Tony Burke, Joseph Ludwig and Claire Moore from the Federal Parliament. These people all work to restore fairness in the workplace and install me in this chamber where the people are the boss. Mr Speaker, I especially remind the other side of the House of this fact. The people of Australia are our bosses, and they spoke very loudly and very clearly. It was truly humbling to see the incredible work that my branch members and union volunteers did throughout Moreton. And why did they do this? They worked tirelessly simply because they believed in a fair and decent Australia. And I promise solemnly, right here and right now, to serve all of Moreton diligently and honestly. I will work to ensure that the Australian fair go is not foregone. Never again. Not in Moreton, not on my watch, or not on our watch. I finish my thanks and acknowledgements with the two most important people in my life, with all due respect to you, Mr Speaker, and to the whip. I see they've been consigned to the soundproof chamber up above. The first person is only 2 years old, but already my greatest inspiration, Stanley Shay Scoynes Perrott, known to his friends as Stan. Stan, as you read this speech, please accept my heart-wrenching apology for all of the nights and days of your life that I missed because of my commitment to the people of Moreton and the great Commonwealth of Australia. Secondly, I thank my best friend, who also happens to be one of the funniest and brightest people I've ever met, and the most beautiful woman in the world. My partner, my wife, my love, my life, Lee Scoynes. I give you all my love and the assurance that I will miss you every single night that I'm away. I will walk the line. They say that behind every successful man stands a very surprised woman. Lee, thank you. Lee, thank you for always hiding your look of surprise. So how did I get here? Well, I have answered that question by listing some of the people who helped me over the last 42 years to arrive here in the 42nd Parliament with 42 other new MPs, or as part of 42 new MPs. It has been said that the ultimate answer to the great question of life, the universe and everything is 42. Mr Speaker, as I'm now 42, it is time for me to ask existentially and practically, why am I here? The answer, I'm from Moreton and I'm here to help. How? Well, firstly, I wish to bring some poetry and literature back to this chamber and throughout Moreton. They say that if you want to avoid offence at a dinner party, you should avoid discussing politics and religion. Well, I taught in Catholic schools for 8 years and was a union organiser in Christian schools for 5 years, and I met some of the most decent people I've ever encountered on this planet. I quickly found out that it's not what people profess to believe, but it's what they do that counts. But back to religion and politics. But I tell you, if you want to put some people offside, it's not politics or religion that does it. All you have to do is recite a bit of poetry. So, Mr Speaker, I give you fair notice that it is my intention to bring some more poetry and literature back into this chamber. To paraphrase Les Murray, Australians need more absolutely ordinary rainbows. Secondly, I will continue to assist Moreton's very healthy multicultural community in projects such as the African Business Initiatives, a Chinese War Memorial and a Southside Multicultural Community Centre. Thirdly, I will assist groups like the Kyabra Community Association to stamp out homelessness. One of the saddest things I had to do when I became a candidate was resign from the board of the Kyabra Community Association. And on a recent tour of a homeless shelter in the Prime Minister's electorate, it broke my heart to see the small lockers that people used to store all that they had amassed in their life. My host, Jeff, said that often people did not even bother coming back to collect all their stuff, to collect all of their life. And I know that I will not be comforted on my deathbed by anything I have amassed. Instead, the achievement I want to stack beside me is the times I helped ease the pain and strain of those doing it tough on our streets. The white lights come on, so my last item on my agenda is all about timing, Mr Speaker. And it came to me when the member for Ford and I rushed over to attend an organ donor awareness function last Thursday. And some people are wearing these wristbands. When we got there, we were told by Anne Cahill-Lambert that we were too late. Anne stood there with her oxygen machine and told us that it was all over. Too late. For me, the presentation I'd missed wasn't life or death, but organ donation is life and death for Anne. And during the 2007 election campaign, it was also too late for my friend Debbie Duddridge. Debbie had been waiting on a set of lungs for more than 2 years, but on the 29th of October last year, it became too late. How many other Debbies are out there? How many Annes waiting, hoping that it won't be too late? Australia's rate of organ donation is shameful. We need to work with our doctors to change this, but you too can help. Have you signed an organ donation form? If not, why not? Have you clearly told your loved ones that you would love your body to keep on working long after you are gone? If not, why not? If your religion prevents you from so doing, perhaps you need to have another talk with your God. Whether you're watching, listening to, or reading this speech, the question you need to ask yourself is, why not? Please commit today to doing somebody else a favour after you're gone. Caring is doing. And if you don't do, well, then you really don't care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.